In the Gulf, where today BP launched an ambitious effort to plug the hole that for more than 5 weeks has been gushing oil into the ocean. We do not yet know if this procedure, called a top kill, will work. What we do know is that whether or not BP stops this oil flow, the damage to the landscape and wildlife is beyond devastation, as Jeffrey Kaufman now reports.
As the sun rose above the Gulf of Mexico, all eyes were fixated on what was happening below its surface. For 5 weeks, that broken well pipe 5,000 feet down has been spewing oil into the Gulf. Early this morning, BP technicians and engineers were preparing their best shot at stopping it. At about the same time, Kathy Norman was boarding a helicopter to survey the oil damage on an 80-square-mile tract of Louisiana coastline owned by the Wisner Donation, a charitable trust that she oversees. The trust owns the land that includes Port Fourchon, Louisiana's main oil port, and it owned 9 miles of spectacular beach and wild marshlands that front on the Gulf of Mexico. As Americans ate breakfast, topic number 1, the oil spill. 5 weeks and counting, frustration mounting. James Carville, a prominent Democrat, broke ranks to attack the president.
And it just looks like he's not involved in this, man. You got to get down here and take control of this, put somebody in charge of this thing and get this thing moving. We're about to die down here.
A while later, we joined Kathy Norman's brother Don, a wildlife biologist and toxicologist, as he set out to do an assessment of the bird population on the Wisner lands. At this time of year, there are more than 50 different species of birds here.
There's 2 semi-palmated plovers.
As we arrived at the beach, a work team overseen by the Army Corps of Engineers was scrambling to block a breach so that oil wouldn't enter the fragile marshlands. It is already too late.
What does this oil mean for these birds?
It means that it's very likely that most of these birds that are oiled will not survive. Now, if the bird has actually been feeding in the water that's got oil in it, or has oil in the organisms that it's eating, it could be ingesting oil either on or in the organisms it's eating.
For 10 years, Don Norman has been doing a census of the birds here. He's watched the population recover from the havoc of Hurricanes Katrina and Gustav. But for the last month, he has been waiting and wondering if BP's spewing oil well represents an even bigger threat.
On Thursday, I didn't see any oiled snowy egrets, and today at least 50% of them were oiled. So we know that there's a lot of birds in the wetland area that are getting exposed to oil, whereas on that Thursday, last Thursday, it was mostly oil on the beach.
If this is a bird's leg.
Yeah, and you can see actually on some of the sandpipers that their legs are the wrong color because their legs have gotten oil on them. The bird isn't oiled itself, but its legs are dark. So
And then if they try to preen themselves,
or try to get that oil off or something, then they ingest it.
By mid-morning, as a dozen remote-controlled robots roamed the sea floor, BP engineers and technicians were still running diagnostic tests. Just after 10 a.m., Kathy Norman meets with a group of contractors she's been working with for several years on a multi-million-dollar project to protect the beaches from erosion. With oil coming ashore, the entire project is now in question.
A major breach past Luke, there's a breach before Luke. They've both been sheet piled off.
On the surface of the Gulf, engineers and technicians are ready. The plan? Inject heavy drilling mud into the broken mechanism on the sea floor. The so-called top kill has never been tried at these depths, but it's considered the best option available. It cannot begin until the Coast Guard gives BP a thumbs up. As the engineers make their final preparations, we set off with Kathy Norman to survey the marshes, beaches, and bayous her trust oversees, a haven of natural diversity.
what is that up there? Is that a dolphin?
People call them dolphins, but they're really porpoises.
Ever since the drill rig sank and the oil slick surfaced, Kathy has been watching nervously.
I was watching it. I was very concerned about the eastern side of the state, and then very quickly that turned around May 7th when tar balls started coming up on our beach.
And what's it been like watching the response?
It was as if no one really knew, there was no plan. No one really knew what to do next as days went on, and the chaos continued. It was very disconcerting to ask people who's making decisions, what are the plans.
Our boat tour takes us past Port Fourchon. 20% of America's oil comes through here, and 3/4 of the rigs off the Louisiana coast are serviced from here.
How important is this to the country?
Well, it's important enough that if people want to drive and heat their homes in the winter, they're going to have ongoing oil and gas operations in Louisiana, and we're taking the brunt of it. We as a state are allowing it in our backyard. We are allowing the oil and gas to come on shore in pipelines that cut through our marshes to help the rest of the country have the oil and gas they need.
Finally, just after 2 p.m., word from BP's control center in Houston that the top kill has begun. Underwater cameras are trained on the 5-story blowout preventer as a ship on the surface begins pumping heavy mud 5,000 feet down, trying to jam it. As the operation begins, cameras capture what looks like a white cloud enveloping the blowout preventer. An engineer watching it worries that the drill mud may be streaming out the top of it.
We'd like to see less mud go up through the riser and more mud go down into the well bore to kill the well.
That looks like oil.
Mid-afternoon, Kathy Norman finishes her tour of the land her trust oversees, almost 2 miles from the coast where we saw oil in the morning, when we see something that shocks her. Oil on the inland marshes.
You can see back there, over there, that there's quite a bit of oil back
All
on
this
these.
brown stain here.
Yeah, and you can see it on all back in these marsh areas.
You've got to be a pretty strong optimist to think it's not going to get any worse.
I think it's going to be a long and ugly event.
This evening, the images from below look much the same. BP holds a news conference to say,
"We expect these activities to be complete sometime over the next 24 hours, but I would stress that this could take longer."
And so, as the moon rose over the Gulf of Mexico tonight, it was not clear what tomorrow would bring. I'm Jeffrey Kaufman for Nightline in Port Fourchon, Louisiana.